All right, Molo Sanbonani. Hello, how's it? Good evening, good evening, good evening. It's a Sunday evening at 8 p.m. You know what that means? It means Usihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty, is on your screens once again. This is another episode of Liberty and Friends, where we wrap up the news week that was. And yeah, what a news week it has been. and yeah, tonight's conversation will perhaps be exemplary of that, if that's the right word that I've used. Is it exemplary? In any event, welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Remember, here on this show, it's not just me who comes to you on a Sunday evening at 8 p.m. I'm joined by the Friends panel, a revolving panel of individuals, voices, opinionistas, guys who you probably maybe read some of their content or you consume some of their other media content, whether they're podcasters or whatever the case may be. Those individuals who are usually on the intellectual spectrum of conservative, libertarian, classical liberal, liberals, and even anarchists, you'll tend to find here on Liberty and Friends, especially because you won't find them on the corporate media. Once again, good evening, welcome to it. You've just joined Liberty and Friends. This is the one long format show that I have, 90 minutes, where we can unpack the news week that was or get into any other conversation. Now, before I introduce my news panel, it seems to be a glitch on Facebook that I'm noticing. I'm not seeing people's names on my little comment screen, which is important because remember, Liberty and Friends involves you, the viewer. You are very much a part of tonight's show insofar as your comments are read on the show. So with that being said, get those comments coming in thick and fast. I will put them up on screen. A reminder also that you can find us at our website at www.bigdaddyliberty.com. There, of course, you can also contribute to the show. Hey, man, we are building an alternative media space here, slowly but surely building it up, joining the leagues, if you will, of other podcasters who are growing their own channels in this country. You can support that, of course. Find us on our website at www.bigdaddyliberty.com. Now, with that jibber jabber out of the way, how about I get into tonight's show? The topic tonight, well. We will look at a conversation perhaps that needs to be had in this country, and that is Black wealth, this notion of Black wealth, as is often touted within the elite circles, people who use race as a proxy for all conversations they have, right? So we'll play that game tonight, unaccustomed as I am to it. But is Black wealth ever increasingly becoming synonymous with corruption, wrongdoing, or illicit wealth? Now, I say this also because there's a second part of the question, which is that same Black wealth being plowed back into Black communities? Are Black South Africans building the sort of institutions that create not only generational wealth, but also uplift generations of Black South Africans? We've had 30 years of democracy in this country, 30 years of race-based policy meant to empower Black South Africans. Are we seeing that empowerment filter into all aspects of society outside of what government does for quote-unquote Black South Africans? As I'm hearing sirens in the background, welcome to the life of Impilo Eselukchini. With that being said, welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Guys, I'm going to introduce my panel tonight. It is a jam-packed house, including some new faces. But let's get into some of the more familiar faces. He is a business analyst out in Pretoria. I'm talking, of course, about Thanda Mabaso. Thanda, Baba, good evening.
Good evening, Sindile. Good evening to all the listeners as well. I'm happy to be here and to be able to contribute to today's conversation.
Baba, it's very good to have you on the show as always. He's 1/3 of that three-legged poiky pot that we call the Manpatria podcast. Very popular on the show. I'm talking, of course, about Koketso Resane. Koketso, Ra Dumela.
Dumelang Bagaitso. It's a good day. It's a brilliant day. Started off the day preaching in church this morning, then watched my team Arsenal do the Lord's work. and then watched Manchester United lose, and hopefully Sindile's team can do the Lord's work versus Tottenham. Good to be here again.
Good to have you on the show, Koketso. As I'm hoping everybody can still hear me. I'm hearing a bit of feedback on my side. Nonetheless, good evening, Putami. Nice to have you on the show. Of course, he just referenced him, and let me bring him on screen. Columnist, writer, thought leader, in a sense. Someone who I also follow his musings on social media is Sindile Vabaza. There he is. Vabaza, Baba, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. It's always good to be back.
Good to have you, Putwami. And indeed, two more faces to get through to tonight. Remember, I did say it's a packed house, so make sure you get yourself a good drink because it's going to be rather lively tonight. She is the fairest of us all here, a marketing guru out in the battle in the Western Cape. I'm talking, of course, about Nolu, Maki. There she is on screen. Is she? Maybe a bit of a tech glitch there. There she is. Nolu, good evening.
Hey, Sihle. Good evening, Sihle. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the show.
Excellento. Good to have you on the show. And last but definitely not least, someone who perhaps we've been having a conversation for a while, asking each other, when will we be on each other's show? He's a growing voice in the country, someone who has very interesting views. And indeed, some of you guys have been begging me to have him on the show. Sam Monkwe, I see you in the comments. I'm sure you'll be very happy tonight. Penuel, the Black Pen. Penuel, Baba, good evening.
Sanbonani to everyone that's on the panel this evening. Sanbonani to everyone who's going to be joining us. And Sihle ngicela for the invite. I'm really honored to be here with you, even though it's virtually, and I'm looking forward to the conversation this evening. Yango.
Absolutely. And Baba, very good to have you on the show. Now, with that being said, it is a full house, as you can see. Let me just remind you, dear viewer, if you're watching tonight's broadcast, hit that like button. Don't forget to hit that like button. It definitely helps grow the show and bring it out to a wider audience. This is Liberty and Friends. Guys, I'm going to get straight into it because I want to show you perhaps where this all began for me. The video that was, I'll call it viral on social media, that depending on who you are, shocked you, or maybe you are used to this. This is a culture you see on a regular basis, if you will, but it definitely has something to show us insofar as what certain segments of our society in this country, the more elite segments of our society, how they act and how they perceive, or pardon me, how they see. Sorry, I'm trapped by my own sentence construction here. Let me take two steps back. The video that I saw really showed perhaps what I characterized as a crass materialism that is very endemic within elite circles and in this country. Now, whenever you talk about the elites, I love to always separate them, not necessarily by race, but more along the lines of the political elites and really the social elites. And often those two mingle with each other. Now, the video itself in question, I want to play it as I just sort my program out, guys. It'll take me a second here to get to it. Have a look at this, guys, and I'll come back with the question. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, I think I'm back on screen. I'm going to begin with you, Koketso. You know, when I looked at this video, and there is no sound in the video, guys. I had to switch the sound off because it had music on, and it risked having my video demonetized. Guys, when I looked at this video, firstly, there's the sense of being shocked, I suppose, because I'm not very big on the nightlife culture in this country. These are not things I'm exposed to necessarily. And I think the first thing I did was to seek advice or seek insight from other people who do enjoy that kind of lifestyle. And the first thing they pointed out, that firstly, this is not a rare occurrence. This is something you see often in the nightclub. In the social hierarchy, you'll see a corner of the more moneyed individuals rock up to these events, often in flashy vehicles, splurge, at times even hundreds of thousands at these events. And the question I then left myself, asked myself, pardon me, sorry, as I jumble this question in my mind, is firstly, why is this, why spend money like this? What am I missing here, Koketso? And, is this endemic towards the elite? And does it segment itself by race?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm really gonna try to stick to one thing at a time so as not to hog the discussion, but there is a lot to unpack here. Look, I don't think it's limited to the elite. As Black people, there were very few success stories, if we can put it like that. Not all of our parents were able to achieve a certain level of success and wealth, etc. And hence you have people who grow up not having many zeros in their bank accounts as a result of that. Fast forward to scenarios where there are people with such monies, or at the very least, it's access to credit. It's not always cash, but access to credit. Fast forward to people who are then given access to that kind of money, and for lack of a better word, they don't know what to do with it. This is how you then end up, in my opinion, at the very least, with people who they want to kind of show themselves as a success story of some sort because they didn't have those role models growing up, or they had very few of them. And it's quite rewarding in society to be that person with more money than anyone else. It's quite rewarding to walk into a venue and people instantly recognize you because you have more money than anyone else. But like I said, it boils down to these are people who do not know what to do with large amounts of money, because they never had, or they have never handled that much money, sometimes never seen that much money before in their lives. And how we got there's another story for a different day. But yeah, let me leave it at this because there is a lot to unpack here.
Guys, you'll forgive me. My program is really misbehaving here. Let me quickly do this and see if it helps. But, Koketso, the point you raised, I think, is a salient one. And I'm really hoping I'm still on screen here because I've lost myself in my monitor. Penuel, I want to come to you because, I think there's a conversation to be had here. And I don't want to limit it because there's really three parts here. And I want to gather my thoughts. And this is where I want to begin this conversation. There is something to be said, as Koketso raises, about the notion of quote unquote new money. We hear this expression quite a lot, especially in a democracy like ours, with a demographic like ours, which does come from a history of being deprived, if you will, of economic opportunity, deprived of a higher standard of living. When you then have a democracy come in that opens up the markets, brings in a large segment of Black South Africans who then enter the middle class, and a lot of them also becoming rather elite, wealthy, due to policy. And I want us, to unpack some of the reasoning behind this, because you can't have this conversation without looking at laws and policies like EPEE, for example, which has created, whether it's a perception or not, the notion of easy money that comes very quickly. Are we seeing the effects of that perhaps play out in the sort of crass behavior, like that video we saw?
I'm currently going through a process where I think I'm trying to rewire my thinking around Black people in particular. I've said some controversial things, or what's deemed controversial on social media, saying something like, I've left being Zulu and I've left being Black as well. So when I see videos like this, they no longer trigger me, whereas they used to trigger me before. And using a word like crass as an example, I now look at things differently. When I saw the video and I listened to some of the thoughts, and I'm assuming a lot of people are going to look at that video and think it's disgusting and it's disgusting opulence and debauchery. But when you think of European counterparts in particular, and maybe we can even look at the Arabs, they've done similar things to these. They just may look different. So instead of dressing up in Gucci and Nautica, whatever brands they wear, they have their own fashion shows. Instead of maybe drinking Moët, they drink whatever they drink, and they have fancy dress parties and they dance. They splurge on things like greyhounds, hunting rabbits, shooting fowls, etc. So maybe Black people haven't reached an aristocrat type of way of splurging money, unless we speak about the Durban July, which is also European influence, horse racing and people dressing up. But this is not much different to that, in my opinion. Whereas before, like I said, I used to also think it was crass, and I'd be like, but who would waste money on such rubbish? Why are you not buying more noble things like artworks and investing offshore? But it is the people that are new in money. They probably still haven't really figured out how to spend their money in such a way that the community applauds them, etc. We've got Patrice Motsepe at the highest ends who splurge their money in things like buying soccer teams. But I think it's just a different group of people. It is not all Black people. It is not most Black people. It's not even rich Black people. We know a lot of very rich Black people who emulate and look like rich Europeans. They have cheese and wine, dates, etc. And this is, for me, just a very small group of people who look like clowns. But who decides, right? Because, I mean, like I said, there are so many other groups who have crazy parties like these, eating sushi of naked girls. Maybe we may be wrong in judging these people. Maybe we're right, but maybe we're just a different segment and we're not the target market. Like I said, I'm going through a process, so it's interesting for me watching videos like that with a different eye that I have now. Yeah.
And let me come in there, because I think you raised some good points and I want to come back to them. And this is how I want to come back to them. Firstly, just to set a quick disclaimer to the audience out there. Guys, no one here is suggesting that, and Penuel is right in pointing it out, that this is just Black people or that they do this because they're Black. That's not the argument anybody's making here. Or at least, let me not speak on other people on the panel. Maybe that is the argument they'll make, but it's definitely the argument I'm making. I think what I'm really trying to get into here is, are we seeing a toxic mashup between policy in this country, how it's enacted, who it's often enacted for, and the perception, therefore, around the beneficiaries of that policy? And this is where perhaps the question, I want to begin with it here. Sindile, I'm going to come to you. Sorry to jump, folks. I usually do it in clockwise order for the first question. But Sindile, I think there is a conversation to be had here around the interplay, and I want to use that word often cited in trendier circles, the intersection. See what I did there? The intersection of policy in this country, which for the last 30 years, whether you agree with it or not, has used race as a proxy for enrichment and empowerment. And often when we say race, as Penuel pointed out, it is a small minority within that race who seemingly are perpetual beneficiaries of so-called empowerment policy. I cited BEE, for example, as the most prominent of those laws. Are we seeing an intersection here of people who are beneficiaries of these laws, then viewing themselves as being recipients of relatively, quote, easy money? And with easy money, if it comes in, easy go out.
Okay, I think there's quite a bit to unpack here. So I'm going to try and base it on a bit of data. So I think we mustn't look at Black people as a singularity, if you will, because I think, so if I look at the SARS data, for example, so I'm going to put a lot of data points and then I'm going to explain why. So SARS data, there were 7,994 people in this country who earned 5 million rand or more. PwC put out a remuneration report. The median pay for a CEO is 5.71 million. It's 3.63 million for a CFO and 3.76 million for an executive director. The big figures you see in the media are the super caps, companies like BHP, MTN, Vodacom. So all of these data sets tell me something. Most people, even though, let's say, a median CFO who earns 3.63 million a year, most people who are earning, let's say, 300,000 Rand a month are not dropping 50,000 Rand on a night out. They've got kids, private schools, they've got mortgage bonds to pay, they've got cars, they've got savings investments. To me, this can sort of be compared to the phenomenon that you saw a couple of years ago with these kids from Ekasi, is Kotan. They take Ultramel and they pour it out and waste it. Rich kids from the suburbs were not doing that. There's a specific mindset attached to that. There's a kind of psychosocial distending attached to that. And we have to be clear that there's a specific kind of Black person which is doing that. And a lot of the time, it's not the Black people involved in the real economy who are waking up and going to jobs and working in big corporate or running their businesses in the real economy. It's usually people with tenders. Sometimes it's just people with corruption. You could even put in criminal elements, people who scam people, all of that. I think there's a very specific mindset to that, and we shouldn't shy away from the criminal element behind some of this. So I think we have to be very, very conscious of saying Black people. We have to say it's a specific kind of Black person, because I can tell you, as somebody who grew up in the former Transkei, Black people have been making money for a long time. And Black people who are involved in real economic activity did not behave like that. They were married, they have kids, they're doing stuff. They might spend money, but they don't spend like this. They don't go and waste it and throw it away and do the whole Skotane thing of throwing Ultramel down. You're never going to see a kid that goes to St. Stidians or St. John's or Bishop's, a Black kid throwing around Ultramel or doing stupid stuff like that. There's a very specific mindset. And to tie back to that policy, it's born from a policy, as you say, with BEE. Because here's my thing. When you talk to a lot of white people and they talk about BEE, they're often like, oh, it's unfair, people are benefiting. But you have to ask yourself, what kind of Black person is benefiting? Because we have to talk about incentives. Because to me, the way I see it, I think the wrong type of Black person is benefiting. Because the people who get close to state contracts are not necessarily the best kind of Black people. What they are doing fundamentally is killing any notion of Black excellence, any competitive notion of Black excellence, of people that are skilled. People that are skilled Black people are not close to that type of thing. They're not in there. There's a very specific incentive structure behind all of this. And we need to be very, very cognizant of it. And we need to sort of unpack it from there and ask ourselves, hey, look, these people are killing Black excellence. They're killing the kind of progression of Black people, because it is an enrichment scheme. And I use this word. It's not an empowerment scheme. It's an enrichment scheme. Because the one thing we do know about Black people, and I'll finish off on this. The one thing we do know is that I'll give you this. There was a study by UCT and Unilever. So it depends how you want to shake that out. Between 2001 and 2008, the Black middle class tripled in this country. So what I'm trying to say to people is this. We need to be very careful to call it empowerment. Let's call it enrichment. Because policies like BEE don't necessarily empower Black people. In this country, wealth has been deracialized, poverty has not. It's a very subtle distinction, but we need to be cognizant of that. BEE has enriched people. It's, in one sense, one of the things, it's deracialized wealth, but it's left poverty pretty much as it is. And in fact, the majority of Black people are worse off now than they were in 1994.
Data does point that out. Penuel, I do see you have a disagreement. I'll get to you in a moment. I just want to do that first round for everybody to get their word in. If you're just joining us, this is Liberty and Friends. My name is Sindile Ngobesa, aka Big Daddy Liberty. We're in conversation tonight with the Koketso Resane from Manpatria podcast, to Sindile, Vabaza, Columnist, and writer Nolu Maki, who is a marketing guru, marketing strategist out in Paarl. Make sure you check her out and her work, pardon me. Thanda Mabaso, who is coming to us all the way from Pretoria. And we're going to come to you in a moment, Thanda. And of course, Penuel, the black pen, who's just experiencing a thunderstorm at the moment. That's why he's on and off camera. Thanda, I want to come to you, Put, because there's a comment that was made by Sindile that I think is quite important. And it's that distinction he's maybe saying we should keep in mind. And indeed, everybody here has pointed it out to an extent of those who have asked. We're talking about a very small subset of Black individuals here who are perpetual beneficiaries, as Sindile points out in more lucid terms, of legislation in this country that its stated intention is to empower Black individuals, but perhaps its actual intention, or pardon me, actual implementation has seen a very small subset of Black individuals most often place those who have close proximity to politicians being the beneficiaries. And perhaps, therefore, it's those individuals who are seeing dispense of this money and income and wealth and riches, perhaps is the more appropriate word, in a frivolous manner. Your initial thoughts on this conversation before I start peppering you guys with other viewpoints?
I see it a little bit differently. I think that what was prefaced by Koketso, the history of lack that a lot of people had in the Black community, does lend itself to people. I mean, even the ones who don't do exactly what we see here. We still, we had the Enyobeni incident a few weeks ago, where kids as young as 13 were in not a nightclub but a tavern and that sort of thing. So there's a very big element within the community to entertain and be entertained and to have entertainment. People will even go as far as doing stokvels and investments so that they have money in December so that they can entertain themselves, you understand? So there's a big emphasis within the community to entertain. And I suppose it's just a way for people to be able to enjoy themselves, and escape, maybe the difficult life that either they're currently living or that they remember from their childhood. And so why I say that is because I think even though it's a select few people who are doing it, it's probably a select few people who are doing it because it's a select few people who have, been enriched. If another person who isn't currently doing it was to suddenly receive 50 million rand tomorrow, we would probably see them do the same thing. So I think it does come down to elements of where people come from, but also it comes down to elements of how did that money come to that particular person. If it came in a very quick, easy way that the person didn't have time to process it coming to them, and they don't have to do any continuous work to keep that money coming in, then it's easy for the mind to start going to thoughts about entertainment. So I think many people are susceptible to it, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily Black people. I'd say anybody who grew up in poverty and a lot of lack and gets quick money is likely to do this. But of course, in the South African context, as Sindile said, poverty does have a racial context in that the vast majority, 90-something% of the people who are poor in the country are Black. But I think that's really where it comes from. It comes from where people's upbringing, and then it also comes from the fact that whoever of us were to get, not whoever, some of us wouldn't, but a lot of people, if they get money, quick money easily, that is what they would turn to. So it's really the question of why is it that in the Black community, a lot of the times the big money that's coming in the community is coming via these tenders, corrupt tenders, and that sort of thing. And why isn't there legitimate, business and business that is being grown that is bringing that money in? Because then I think you would see, because a person would be working for it and they'd still have a vision for it, they would use that money differently, even if it's the same amount of money.
Yes, even as you say that, Thanda, Nolu, I'm going to throw this initial question to you again. And you'll forgive me here, guys, because I'm hearing the flavor in the room, and it's eliciting so many questions, and I'm furiously writing out here. But Nolu, as I give you your first take, there's a conversation to be had here, as I'm hearing everybody unpack it. We're talking about different folks here, and the Black people aren't some singular hive mind monolith. You can segment it, if you will, by class. Within, if you want to use race is insufficient. One has to segment Black folk by class. And we've almost unpacked here this notion that it's a very small subset of Black individuals who are reaping the benefits, almost hand over fist, of imali. And it's those individuals that we're seeing almost become those images that we saw. Nolu, your first take before I come back to Penuel and others?
Yeah, I think there's a video that I've once watched of Jay-Z. If you remember, when he started, he used to wear a lot of gold and chains and all of that. And that was before he became a billionaire, by the way. And then when he became a billionaire, he started to be a subtle person. He didn't have those chains, didn't have all those extravagant, meaning I want you to see me that I do have money. So right now, he's more of that subtle person, as I've said. That's number one, the point that I want to make in this instance. Now, when it comes to the general populace of Black people, what we lack, I'm going to talk about us. And we do this as marketers because we know that the people who want to splurge money, it's always us. For one reason. Number one, we aren't taught how to pass down wealth. And wealth, Sihle, it's not just about money. We aren't taught how to behave when you go to your first job. We aren't taught what is the important thing you need to have when you get that first job. Is it really buying a polo? Because Volkswagen is getting a lot of money from young people, simply because we know that that is a kind of dream that we are all aspiring towards. So our problems, they begin because we don't have that fundamental teaching in how to actually take care of your wealth from 5,000 to whatever millions that you have. I know the group of people that we're just talking about. I'm just talking even in general here about us, our issues as Black people. And then you fast forward, you look at the group that we've just seen right now. The sad thing about that group is that another young Black man who's sitting, the young guy, might think that is how you need to behave when you do have money. It doesn't matter how much or how much money that you have, but that's the kind of behavior that you should be doing. You should actually show people that, you know what, I have arrived now, and we all want to show our arrival in a different kind of way. So my point is this, that our issues, they begin because we do not have the kind of teaching. Listen, anyone behaves a certain way when they've received money, but it takes time, or it takes teaching for that person to understand how to actually make sure they behave better now that they've got that money. And I think so long as we don't have those people who are passing down those teachings to us, these are kind of things that we are going to see, which they aren't beneficial for us as a society, especially again, as Black people, because at the end of the day, they're painting something that is not true, if you really think about it. But at the same time, the crux of what I'm saying is that we need to understand our lack, and it begins on the fact that we don't have people. Like, for instance, Sindile, as I said, the aunties that, the people who had wealth before, to teach the next generation that, listen, this is how you behave when you've got money. So for me, I think I would begin from there, even before I go to your BEs and the tenders. But that is because you see that at the small scale, I know what's the dream of a young person who's sitting in that varsity. What do they want to look like? They want to show off. And for that matter, I don't think there's anyone here who buys anything who wouldn't want to go and show someone what they have. Whether it's your mother, whether it's whoever, but you want to be seen with whatever item you bought with your own money. I understand we are talking about the BE guys, but I just wanted to bring it just in a small segment in that sense that let's understand we do not have people that teach us how to behave with the money that we have as Black children.
Okay, we've gone around the room. I've gauged the temperature in here, and I can feel it warming up in here. There's quite a few disagreements. We'll get to that in a moment, guys. Let me just do some housekeeping. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. Get my likes up, people. Hit that like button right now. Help share the stream, and I'll start filtering in some of your comments as the viewers and the questions, of course. So if you do have a question, please make sure you put the person's name who you'd want me to direct that question to. This is Liberty and Friends. Guys, I want to play some videos here so that maybe for those who aren't sure what we're talking about, they'll get a strong sense of what I characterize almost drawing from Marxist lexicon here as crass materialism, but indeed a culture of people dispensing of money through frivolity. This is the izikotane subculture that Sindile, I think, was mentioning earlier on, of these young individuals who perhaps watching the more wealthier, the more richer lot live this life of frivolous expenditure of money, seek to emulate it, even though they themselves are from very poor backgrounds. This is a group of young people from the Ekurhuleni area, Kagiso, actually, correction, Kagiso, who shot to fame for this behavior. Yeah, as I said, you know, this clip, pardon me, was courtesy, excuse me, of ETV back then, and indeed it was on a special feature called Third Degree. These are very poor young people effectively trying to emulate that life of sheer opulence, if you will, doing things which are seemingly irrational to the rest of us, like burning money and buying shoes, when back home there's barely enough to eat. I want to play or flight some images so that you people get a strong sense of what we're talking about here when we talk about the kinds of money. Have a look at this. This is an establishment in Pretoria. The image perhaps is not as clear as it should be, but that total bill there is of 1.37 million rand that was spent in a single evening at an establishment in Pretoria. On that particular list is some of the more expensive, lavish alcohols, champagnes, and the like. Another such case is in Durban, where an individual spent nearly north of 750,000 rand. Again, expensive liquors being the order of the day. I want to bring on screen a short article here, which basically speaks of the next example. Bear with me, people. I'm just trying to put it on. Maybe as I'm trying to do exactly that, here's the bill in question, which is of an eatery in Johannesburg, if I'm not mistaken, where 80,000 rand was spent. And initially, when this image went viral, people thought the president, the former president rather, of the Republic of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, was the one who was behind this particular bill. This is the article I'm referring to that I want to just quickly get on screen here. Bear with me, people, and maybe as I'm doing that, hit that like button, please. Get my engagement up. There it is. Let me just get rid of this image and quickly do that. Now, this article, of course, is quite old, but it gives context into that particular, as it calls it, whopping 80,000 rand plus restaurant bill, which the spokesperson of the presidency, then, of course, President Jacob Zuma being the president, coming out and denying these allegations. I want to quickly read from this piece. The receipt, which can easily contend for the title of the most expensive eatery bill to surface online, shows that the table spent 73,053 rand 50 cents, mostly on booze, and finished it off with a tip of 7,300 plus. Wow, lucky waiter that was. Sadly, we can't answer the question of, quote, who are these people? A general manager at the restaurant who refused to be named confirmed the legitimacy of the receipts, but denied reports that the president and his wives were ever at the restaurant. Here's the kicker. The bill shows that in addition to food, including 4 langoustines and at an eye-watering 3,200 Rand, lamb shank and other food items, the customer spends 65,000 Rand plus at the bar. Guys, some of the liquors being cited here are some of the most exclusive of such products. Penuel, let me come back to you because I could see you shaking your head earlier as some of the comments were being made here. But before I have you sort of respond where you want to respond, I want to get to the second part of tonight's conversation, which is a more controversial part of it. And maybe as I say that, let me just quickly show that image of what you were talking about. Or was it Sindile once again? Hey, Sindile, you covered a lot of ground here. Okay, this image actually isn't here. Let's quickly do this. You know, here are some controversial figures, guys, who maybe exemplified the very culture and subculture we're talking about here. A one Kenny Kunen, who's now obviously rebranded himself as a politician within the Patriotic Alliance, but his claim to fame, if you will, or infamy rather, was being a establishment owner, then czar, eating sushi of naked or sort of scantily clad women. This culture, Penuel, of as we've lost to Penuel. Okay. Koketso, this culture, therefore, if I come back to you, and this is why I wanted to come here. Are we perhaps seeing an unfortunate link being drawn by people of Black wealth being akin to or being maybe from the proceeds of crime, fraud, corruption, and the like? I say this because you'll remember, of course, there was that story that just broke on Friday of the SIU, the Special Investigative Unit, coming out and basically saying it's frozen the assets of numerous individuals named in an investigation, an ongoing one which we've covered here on this show, including the morning show that I do, Ivuga Nazo, the National Lotteries Commission, under hectic investigation by the SIU. You'll bear with me as I try and bring this on screen. Give me a second, folks. It always takes a brief second to do it here. The SIU, of course, as I said, the Special Investigative Unit, part of the names it rang out was that of celebrity Terry Peto of the movie Tsotsi fame. And I want to quickly read that particular section where the Special Investigating Unit, said that actress Terry Peto, or Terry Peto, she's commonly known, who's also known as Terry Peto, as I've mentioned, was amongst those implicated and who have been prohibited from selling, disposing, or leasing, transferring, donating, or dealing in any manner whatsoever with respect to the immovable and movable properties. Other implicated individuals include a lawyer, Leslie Ramuli, for Colin Mukondeleli. You'll forgive me. My Zulu tongue is struggling with these ones. Fulufelo Karive, AO Residence Trust, represented by one Mashudu Shandukani. Hold on to that name because I'll show you a clip in a moment. Rase Mate or Ray's Mate Family Trust, represented by Rebotile Malomane Majokom. Okay, quite a few individuals, but as I said, hold on to that name, Umashudu Shandukani, because the question I want to pose here: are we seeing Black wealth or wealthy Black individuals inherently being seen with suspicion, given that a lot of stories that do break of supposedly wealthy individuals often involves them being involved in corrupt activities? That particular Shandukani character I'm speaking of was even featured on Top Billing. Have a look at this.
Both from rural villages in Limpopo, Pretty became a civil engineer and her husband Mashudu a geologist. Their decision to go independent and form a consultancy 11 years ago brought hard work and reward.
What are some of the unique challenges you faced building your own home as opposed to somebody else's?
Building your own house, at least you've got liberty. you know what you want. But when you're building somebody's house, at times you find that, people always change and whatever they bring forward. Some clients are very difficult. So, but when you're building your own house, at least you know that you're only dealing with yourself.
How do you guys balance being partners in the business aspect and then coming back home and also having kids and everything else?
We are well able to differentiate the stresses that he go through as the CEO of the company and the stress that I go through as the MD of the company. So he understands my stresses, I understand his stresses. So we are well able to balance it when we come back home.
Well, I must also point out, just for fairness and perhaps legal reasons, these are allegations being leveled against them under an active investigation by the SIU. Of course, we live in a country where people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. But nonetheless, Koketso, serious allegations which only further lend credence to this idea that the people who are beneficiaries of this fast money, as I called it, often through the conduit of race-based empowerment legislation, or as Sindile said, enrichment legislation, often sully the name of so-called rich Black individuals, or quote, Black wealth.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to be frank here. I think we need to stop making excuses for beacons of Black excellence because, that's what society calls them, right? Avatars of Black excellence. We need to stop making excuses for them when allegations come out. Again, allegations at this point. But when information comes out that monies has been gained in an illicit manner, we need to stop making excuses for them. I'm actually reminded about much of the backlash which we see almost every quarter when, or at least once a year, when corporates actually have to declare earnings, etc., and then corporate executives are then given fat bonuses, etc. And we know what happens, particularly in sectors like retail, where a Crystal Visa would get a fat bonus, and then people would then draw parallels with how it doesn't make sense how certain key individuals, CEOs and the like, walk away with 9-figure amounts as bonuses, sometimes 10 figures even, as bonuses, while their lowest paid worker is taking home 3,500 rand a month. People are very quick to call that out, but they ignore the gaping hole here in that people who typically get rewarded such fat monies, in an ideal world, they are building something, or they have built something, and they are now reaping that which they have sowed. You don't see that with many of the individuals which, the SIU is pointing out in this instance. I don't see the same level of Black excellence in people who are then ousted by the SIU, etc. For all the talk of how policies like BEE is supposed to generate wealth and create Black excellence, etc. I forget the word the president used quite recently, actually. I forget the word, but for all the talk of that, I don't see things being built that will actually outlast them. And then to make matters worse, what I then see after the fact, pretty much it doesn't even take a lifetime to see this, but what I then see after the fact is that they are easily roped into some form of nefarious illegal activity. And then people want to stand behind them and defend them because people interpret it as a narrative that goes against Black industrialists, etc., who are making it big in life. We need to stop making excuses for them. What I want to see is seeing people who have access to capital at the very least, being the people who then go out and create jobs, who then build something that will outlast themselves, who then go out and create these new brands that will spread out into the continent and also the rest of the world. I don't see any of that. Instead, what I'm presented with almost on a yearly basis is how someone has actually siphoned money out of state institutions, be it a municipality, a state-owned entity, or some other organization such as the National Lotteries Commission. The government has set up many bodies which aim to basically pull Black people out of poverty, or let me use the correct terminology here, historically disadvantaged individuals. They've set up many bodies that look to actually fill that gap and pull people out of historically disadvantagedness, if I can put it like that. But these are the same institutions which are typically hollowed out by the very Black people whom these institutions are set up to actually help establish. everything from the IDC, which has never had a good reputation, to the Development Bank of South Africa, to you name it, to the National Lotteries Commission. All of these things typically are hollowed out time and time again by the people who they're meant to actually serve. And we're not calling them out enough. Instead, when things like this happen, we want to be on the defensive and say this is yet another targeting of Black people. And it typically isn't. If it was, then why is it that we don't see the same level of scorn, Steinhoff aside, of course? Why don't we see the same level of scorn leveled at what quote unquote white business? Why does it seem like a lot of white business is either A, not doing the same levels of corruption, or B, is covering their tracks really well? That's the question for me. So we really need to stop making these excuses for them, and we need to have honest conversations with ourselves in terms of who's really benefiting from here. And I like the word Sindile used, that it's enrichment. It's not empowerment. It's actually enrichment of a select few at the top, and that is the same select few at the top who create a new club of just themselves and keep everyone else out. In an ideal world, you'd want to see them actually expand and create those jobs and make that table or make that circle bigger, instead of deciding who gets to sit down on this game of musical chairs that comes down to things like opulence, etc. I'll leave it at that.
Sindile?
Oh, thank you. I would like to piggyback over what the other guests have said, because they've made some really salient points. So I'd like to start with where Koketso is. So for me, I think you have to take the conversation back a little bit, because we have to ask ourselves, how is wealth created? And the data points are pretty simple. The average age of a millionaire in the world is 56. The average age of a millionaire in South Africa is 55. Wealth is built over time. In South Africa, we have this thing of always wanting to skip steps. We want to immediately have the wealth. A lot of Black people immediately want to have the wealth that white people have had a chance to build over a long time. That is the first problem of this easy money culture. And secondly, I want to say this. There are a lot of Black people who are in legitimate businesses, usually in a place like Gauteng. And I must say this because I think personally we have to differentiate between Gauteng and a lot of other provinces. Because if you go to Gauteng, you will find a lot of Black people have made money through corporate careers and legitimate business. Once you start getting outside of Gauteng, you will see that the wealthiest Black people are usually into entrepreneurship. They're usually into some other stuff, a government job. And by the way, we have to have this because this is also an economics discussion. Because one of the problems that we have, and Moelet Mbeki said it once, and he said, one of the problems with what we are doing as Black people is that because so much of the Black middle class and the Black upper class is concentrated in government, they're not in the real economy creating value. Because here's what we need to do as Black people and think. We have to be thinking about value creation, not Black businesses, Black value creation. And Black value creation is not just businesses, it's also social institutions. It's also not every idea is monetizable. Not every good idea is monetizable. So we have that issue to think about, because the other thing, I think Nolu raised it, was a culture of wealth. And I think she's absolutely correct about that, because I think there is a whole culture that needs to be built. If your wealth, for example, has been built over the long haul, you get used to stuff. You get used to saying, okay, I am in the real economy. I face the headwinds of the economy. I face bull and bear markets. There's a kind of disciplining effect in being put under the sort of scope of the market. And a lot of these people who make easy money, they are shielded from the disciplining work, which is why it's so easy for them to just spend money recklessly as they do. So I want to go back to this data point. The median CEO in South Africa makes 5.71 million. This was a PwC remuneration report. If the median CEO is not spending R1 million eating out, no matter what color they are, the median CFO, the median executive director is not. We have to say this: the people spending this money have to be the easy money, Because to be quite frank and honest, I don't see Sim Shabalala, the Standard Bank CEO, or Fani Titi at Investec, or Ralph Mupita at MTN. I don't necessarily, if they do, they probably do it discreetly if they do it. But I don't see them going out publicly and doing this sort of thing. Because there is a lot of black wealth in this country that's very quiet and it's not reported on. It's always these loud new money people. And for me, and I think Thanda raised it about coming from poverty. Because I think poverty as well, and this is the other strand, has a very kind of psychosocially distending effect on people. Because it makes you feel less than. It makes you feel like you have a lot to prove. It makes you feel some type of certain way when you move up and you're not sure of the culture you're in. Because one of the things that happens is when you move into a new social class, there's a whole bunch of cultural aspects you have to learn. All of a sudden, you're going to cheese and wines. In Joburg, you have that BMW Polo thing. There's so many different things. And people do that, and people kind of spend this money as a way to go, I'm better than you. It's like a new money problem. It happens in a lot of the world. You see it with some of, as Penuel mentioned, with Saudi Arabia and the Arabs and some of the gaudy stuff that happens that side as well. It's the new money. It's the easy money from oil. But the problem with that is that if you learn and see what's happened around the world with people that have done that, the Venezuelans did that as well. And then their market crashed after that. So we have to be very, very cognizant of saying as Black people, this is, yes, a class problem, a social problem, an economic problem as well, because so much of this is tied to government, and government is a lag on investment in the economy. It is a lag on tax because the people who work in the real economy are taxed to support the people who work in government. And so that's kind of like part of the problem with sort of the wealth dynamic in the Black community. You've got certain Black people who are making money in the real economy, and then you've got another group of Black people where they don't face the disciplining effect of working in the real economy and in the market. They work for government where there are no incentives. So there's a very different mindset there as well.
Yes, I want to come to Thanda and then Penuel, because I think we have him back. We had lost him to the storm. And we're in the last 30 minutes of the show. So I want to move us to that next question, but you guys are welcome to follow up on points that you may have missed. For me, once one moves past the question perhaps of that small subset of Black society, and again, for those who are just joining us and wondering why are we talking about Black this, Black that, I'm using the language that is often pushed out in the corporate media around, firstly, what policy in this country has used to pick winners and losers, and that is race. So often when we talk about Black wealth, it's off of the back that policy in this country recognizes the need to create wealth, as I shasha mosquito here, create wealth for Black people. Now, it's those Black individuals that I'm looking to have a conversation about insofar as, and this is the question here that Thanda I wanted to grapple with, and then Penuel. Are we then seeing those Black individuals, those people who trade on that Black skin? They'll be the first to tell you, oh no, they'll say, we've got to empower people based on skin color, because it was on the basis of skin color that people were disenfranchised in the past, whether during the years of apartheid and colonialism, etc., etc. We've got to use race, therefore, to empower individuals. The question is then posed of those individuals who trade on Black wealth or wealth in the hands of Black people. What are they doing to then, if you will, distribute income, grow the economy, but most importantly, as Koketso touched on, create institutions that support, empower, and indeed raise the tide, to raise living standards for Black individuals? Because often, Thanda, and this is where my bone of contention is, those same individuals who trade on that quote-unquote Blackness will be the first to complain, bitch and moan indeed, when it comes to other cultural groupings, maybe even other racial groupings in this country, who do band together to create value, as Sindile spoke about, for themselves. Let me use the AfriForum as an example. AfriForum is perhaps the single most recognizable organization in the country of Afrikaans-speaking individuals in this country who've said, you know what, to hell with waiting for the state to do anything. We're going to band together the little resources we have, form the civic society organization, and do things for ourselves, whether those things are cleanup crews, such as the image I have on screen, where they organize these cleanup bodies around the country, where people clean their own communities, or even safety and security, where AfriForum has become so advanced, where they're even deploying border watchers. You can see those fellas there with German shepherds there to sniff out all sorts of wrongdoing on the border. I can go down the line when it comes to this, but Thanda, that conversation must be had. Are we seeing Black individuals, those Black elites, invest in a similar vein, especially when they talk about Black empowerment? Where are the Black institutions, Thanda?
Okay, yes, that's a very good question. I think the issue for me is, somebody else mentioned it. Somebody mentioned it in the comments as well, and said, often the way that the ANC has decided to design empowerment, what they call empowerment, they've designed it in a way that it's not really growing anything. And at the same time, it's keeping people who do get empowered, in quotation marks, by them, still dependent on them. So if you are a Sam, what was that guy, Sam Holdings or something, and because of your proximity to an ANC branch or politician or something like that, you got a big tender.
The deputy president.
It means you've got no skill. It means you've got no, nothing legitimate with which you can continue to make more money. So you're going to have to go back to them again and to make the next few millions that you need. So because the ANC has presided over a growing criminal network, a lot of those people who get money out of tenders are not people who have any kind of skills that they could deploy in the way that you are asking them to deploy it. They are just dependent on going back and getting some more tenders, so long as they keep in favor, and donate at the right times. We saw at the Zondo Commission that some of these people are then used to donate to ANC events or to certain politicians' campaigns and that sort of thing. So you can't really look for that sort of thing there. So my thing is that what we actually need is for the government to be talking about talk about creating institutions, talk about properly empowering people. So in South Africa, for example, I made an example to somebody and I said, we've got a lot of raw materials in South Africa, whether it's coal, which is being talked about a lot today, or whether the many minerals that we have. I saw a statistic that 40% of the world's gold that has ever been mined was mined, somewhere in the Witwatersrand or something like that. No, I'm not sure if it was a Witwatersrand, but somewhere in Gauteng. And so we've got a lot of raw materials that in South Africa that we ship out, which then get processed and created into final goods, some of which we end up importing. And in South Africa, we had a prime opportunity to open up and grow an economy by focusing on creating the industries that would beneficiate this type of stuff, so that we send out more finished goods, and maybe we even create products that we start selling amongst ourselves and somewhere else. So that could have been the focus. And then the people who would have come to the fore in that scenario would have been people who had a mind to build, had skills, that they could bring to bear. You would have had the growth of legitimate business people. And then those people could then go forward. You could start asking them questions, and they probably wouldn't have to ask them questions. They would then start establishing the institutions you're talking about, whether they are social or whatever, because we do see that those people who have gotten their money legitimately and do end up having a lot of money, they do try to create opportunities. They mentor other business people. They will create certain charities or do that type of thing. So when people are properly empowered rather than being enriched, I like that we are making that distinction. When people are properly empowered and the economy is grown and opportunities are given for people to create wealth for themselves, then you will see a different type of response from them into that wealth.
Thank you very much, Thanda. Usihle has given me the privilege of being able to speak straight after you. I'd like to apologize to all the panelists and all the viewers for disappearing. Very bad thunderstorm that was here in Joburg, or at least my region of Joburg. I think Koketso, it might have moved to him. I prayed very hard to the lightning gods and the thunder gods, because I'm tired. There isn't enough time on this show, I believe. I see we need to wrap up in about 23 minutes. And I found myself getting very triggered by some of the statements that Sindile was making. I think I've calmed down a bit. I had something to drink to calm my nerves. I've got a lot of issues with some Black people in this country. Our political leadership, some Black business people, some Black professionals, normal Black people, poor Black people, middle class. I've got a lot of issues, I've vented a lot of them on social media. Sindile started off, and look, I'm going to apologize for what I missed. He started off by speaking about stats and data, and then he said, wealth has been deracialized, and nothing could be further from the truth. Speaking on stats and data, you can actually see it. There's been a lot of growth in Black millionaires, Indian millionaires, a little bit of growth in colored millionaires. But by and large, by a long shot, white people are still wealthy by far in this country. Number two, he spoke about, or rather we were speaking about this crass materialism. And I was just trying to rack my brain thinking of examples. There's a lot of white kids, Indian kids in this country that blow cash on garbage. If you've been to some of these elite universities, high schools, you'll know about the cocaine parties. You'll know about some of the bush diving and the amounts of money that they spend. Jay-Z was mentioned as someone who's become more subtle, which is cute, but this is the same Jay-Z who with Kanye went and they tore up, I think it was maybe a Maybach in a video. That's a form of crass materialism in itself. And it's not just them, it's a lot of people. Of course, in this country, we have a 80% Black population. So on social media, the stories that will trend will be the Black ones. You're not going to see Indian guys burning tires on their Ferraris. You're not going to see white people busy smashing windows because they're drunk and they're going crazy. So that becomes the story and the narrative, and it's quite sad for me. The other issue I have is the fact that we say that BEE is not empowerment and it's enrichment. Again, I need to say that I have a huge problem with a lot of Black people in this country who have helped for this narrative to thrive. But BEE has got 7 pillars, part of them which include employment equity. So we have to be thankful for more Black engineers, more Black doctors, more Black lawyers, more Black actuaries, etc. Some of it is socio-economic development. Some of the money that's actually gone into the communities is because of BEE. Preferential procurement, skills development. These BEE shares that our MTN, our Sesol have had, that our mothers have gone and jumped into, that's BEE. There's a lot of spaces in corporate that we couldn't play in, even in the private sector, because some of the work that they do is in the public sector. So if you want to get work with them, you need to make sure that you get Black people on board. So I have an issue with that. Then I have an issue with the fact that some of us sound like these clever Blacks, which are very upsetting. We want to judge certain Black people on how they make their money. So we almost demonize tenders, of which all of us should be doing tenders, because it means you're servicing the country, by and large. The second thing is all these people that we mentioned, you can mention a Sim Shabalala, a Funny Titi, whatever. It means clearly we only want a certain type of good black to have money. Only a CEO should make money. And it can't be that a young person that is in trucking, a young person that is doing tenders in some way can have money. How you spend your money, look, if it's legitimately made, is really up to you. It may look crass, we may not like it, but maybe I don't like shooting buck on the weekend. Maybe I don't like buying artworks for 2 million rand. Maybe I don't like throwing nice fancy dinners in hidden corners, with expensive champagne glasses. But that's me. And for some people, but some groove and wear these expensive brands and splurge on bottles. It's probably once in a while, etc. That's why these things trend. That's why a 1 million rand bill is going to trend, because it's not normal. It's highly abnormal for everyone. But I can tell you there's a lot of legitimate black business people that splurge way more money than that. It's just, it doesn't trend, it doesn't go out there, because we don't know what Patrice spends on certain things in his family. We don't know what Sol spends. I mean, besides the dollars that we find in Palapal, we don't know the money that he's spending on whatever he's doing. So I think we need to be very careful in taking a moral high ground in judging black people and how they make money, in judging BEE, which I've seen now, Omteto Nyati, have closed the taps, or they're closing the taps with ESCOM. I know Cyril has been pushing for BEE to be scrapped in the tender space. It's because it's normal. The ANC wanted to come in, sit at the table with the Afrikaans elite, with the British elite. They've succeeded in that, and now they want to close the taps, close the gates. And you won't see it now. You're going to see it the day you're looking for a job. You're going to see it the day you're looking for funding, the day you want to come in as an SMME and partner with a big business so you can get some experience. There's a lot of black people, young and old, in this country that are doing amazing work. Some of them splurge that money, of course, but it's not a racial thing. It just so happens that a video that trends of people pouring Ultramel on fucking Cavelas is going to be a couple of black people. And it's annoying, but it's only because we don't associate with that type of lifestyle, but it makes them happy in the same way some of us are happy spending our money somewhere else.
Penuel, you make some good points, and I see Koketso and Sindile are chomping at the bit. So, guys, I'm going to go to Nolu, and then it's going to be an open discussion, really, because we're in the last 15 minutes. And if you guys all agree, I might ask for just an extra 15 minutes, just 15, and then we'll close it off there. If everybody's okay with that, please give me a thumbs up. But just another 15 minutes, because I think it gets interesting at this point. Nolu, your thoughts, and then I'll go to you when Sindile.
Sure. I've just done a research before we started of BMF. I just want to dispel not to dispel, but to disagree with the panel. I'm a black woman. I have a right as a black woman to actually judge what my previous leaders, or actual fact, the leaders of this country have been doing. BMF, I've looked and I've contrasted them or juxtaposed them to all other foundations, or rather, say all other organizations. For instance, your Afro Forums, your Free Market Foundation, all, let's call them the other race that are actually led by other race, let's say white people. In this instance, I couldn't find what does BMF do for ordinary black South Africans. What have they built that they can show? You know what? Since 1976, we have created a university where it's mostly owned, or not actually just owned, ran by black people, where we have amazing STEM as the STEMs. Sorry, man, I'm chopped by my own words here. But then we are producing amazing, innovative young people through all different industries. We don't see that. What we see instead, I've just looked at the directors of the board of BMF. It's been in existence since 1976, if I'm not mistaken. All I've seen is just these individuals on this board, even the president of BMF, they've just been sitting on top of these corporates, some of them. And then on top of that, you find that they're the very same people who are fighting to put black people in these corporates. Now, what I understand about this organization panel is that these guys, they are fighting to put you as a black child in someone else's corporation, meaning the white people who've been leading these corporations. They aren't saying to me that I should go out there, create my own wealth so that I can actually uplift other 15 Nolu Maki, that can actually be something. No, we should fight for someone else's things because guess what? It was created in this country, so therefore I need to have it. That is stupid. Nobody cares in this case, or I don't care about who makes what, how much money, because guess what? I understand capitalism, that when you work, it works for you. But what I am sick and tired of is when they tell us as young people that we should be worried about what Afro Forums and the RRR and others that what they are doing, because guess what? They've got the money, so therefore we should fight for their things. It is counterproductive for us as Black people. We don't have time. I just said earlier on that, listen, we don't have parents to teach us about wealth. Goodness me, to tell you what to say in an interview. We don't have that. Yet we're the very same people who are being taught, guess what? Worry about what Yanfan, whoever, what he has. Make him your enemy. Are you kidding me? That child already has a car when he went to school. Freaking me, I didn't have that. You're right. And I don't care. I don't want it. But what I had with my parents, it was enough to take me where I am today. My frustration panel is the fact that our Black leaders, they failed us and they continue to fail us, both politically as well as even in the corporate sector. And they're doing so continuously by lying to us and saying to us our problems, they begin with the white person. Not the fact that, guess what? As 6 of us sitting here, can we start a foundation where we create things that help? Can we go to just an ordinary high school and go actually help those kids with maths and science? Those simple things. But no, our focus should be what the white person has done. And we can't create anything of our own, making us look like we are dumb. I'm not dumb, panel. I can sit with a white child in an interview and outsmart them because guess what? I've been teaching, I've got skills. Meaning I don't have an excuse. They are not my enemy anymore. But my point is that my frustration is with the Black leaders of this country. And I've got the right to hold them accountable. And I will hold them accountable because I'm sick and tired of this nonsense that is holding our young people. Because guess what? They splurge with money. They don't have a vision. The reason we're actually angry at white people, guys, because they are visionaries. They plan for tomorrow. They know that a 4th generation needs to have this bread that I'm eating right now. How many of us think about that? Because if we thought like that, we wouldn't have time to be pouring champagne in a shoe and doing all the sorts of nonsense. It's your right, my guy. Enjoy it. But guess this, majority of other young people, they think that that's what I should be doing. We don't have this luxury that we think we have. I'm angry. Let me stop.
Hi, Impela. Peno, hold on to those points. Sindile, I know you want to have a response. Koketso, I do know you want to have a response. Thanda, I'll come to you after that. And I'll pose a question. I must pose it to everybody once again, just as a refresher. Guys, where are these Black institutions, Gay? Because we speak a lot, and this is the crux of tonight's conversation. There'll always be a lot of talk in this country, especially in the corporate media, in the chattering classes. Oh, they'll tell us about the AfriForum, those evil white Afrikaners at AfriForum. Look at them, how dare they fix their own streets and create their own institutions and blah, blah, blah. Don't they know that we have Black politicians in this country? It's a Black country now in inverted commas, and I'm using this race talk. It's so alien to me, but bear with me. It's for the purpose of this conversation. Sindile.
So a couple of things. I want to respond directly to Penuel and then kind of add on to that. So here's my thing, and people often don't understand how data sets and statistics work. Remember, initially, I talked about wealth taking time to take effect. So yes, he quoted the thing about Black millionaires, etc., coming online. My point was this: wealth has been deracialized. So between 2001 and 2008, the Black middle class did triple. Not perfect, some issues around that, I won't get into that. My point in this was that the Black middle class, depending on what metrics you use, is probably the same size or larger than the white middle class. You understand? So that is the first point I want to make. The second point is a personal one because he talks about, he said a lot about clever bats, etc., etc. So in the spirit of graciousness, this is what I want to say to Penuel. Me, I come from the former Transkei. So there's a kind of a different inflection to the way that I see racial issues. Number one, where I was born, Mthatha, was a man called Umatanzima who was in charge. He built the university, UNITRA. He built stuff which post-94 was taken over by the ANC. Where I grew up with Black people, I grew up with a father who was an attorney and a businessman, a mother who was a nurse, neighbors who used to take us to a very good private school, which was run completely by Black people. So much so to the point when I went from an all-Black private school to an all-white one in Maritzburg at boarding school, it was a seamless transition. There was a thing, so all of these kids that talk about Black excellence, that is a fundamental psychological thing for me, is that I get that inflection point. I saw Black people from in the cradle doing things, running businesses, being lawyers, being this, being that. So when I see people who start from, because my grandfather, 1957, he left the rural areas, he got a law degree, he was part of the Cape Law Society. I have a picture of him in 1957. It's him and two other lawyers, and it's just a bunch of white lawyers. My whole psychology has been, Black people have always been capable. Black people can always do stuff, but we must subject ourselves to the same disciplines of the market and of wealth creation and of culture creation that everyone else does. Being spoon-fed and nannied, like what the government does, it doesn't encourage us to grow and have wings and face the kind of hardship that will forge a culture. So that is the kind of thing I want to make clear to Penuel. I'm not saying in any stretch of the imagination that I want specific kind of Black people. My argument is simply this. I want Black people to face these same market forces and disciplines so that we can be strong and forge our cultures and learn to be entrepreneurial. So for example, you see the Black people that come from other countries, that come to our small towns and dying towns and become entrepreneurs and buy buildings because they don't have the luxury of a government that's going to nanny them. That is my point there for saying that. So that was my point to Penuel. The second thing is this. When he talks about empowerment, and this is probably just my final thing that I really want to say. When we talk about Black institutions, I'm a little iffy. And the reason is this. The things that will help Black people succeed in this country are the things that will help everybody. So for example, I'll give you this. There's three things I want to talk about. Food security. People don't think enough about this. So 4 out of 10 South Africans are either mildly or severely food insecure. And most of those people are Black. And if you understand anything about child development and about pregnant women starving, because a lot of women do, it stunts your growth. It starts for a lot of Black kids in the womb. It starts with mothers who are hungry, who can't bond with their children and who neglect them. It's an understated point. Food security, whether you're a poor Black person or a poor white person, helps everybody, but it helps disproportionately the poor Black people. Number 2 is education. And I want to say these stats because they're very important. There was a TIMS assessment. 79% of South African teachers do not have sufficient content knowledge in this country. There was another thing called the SACMEC assessment. The bottom 20% of teachers were outscored on things like maths and reading by the top 20% of students. If you want to put it this way, the kids who are learning in Claremont or the fancy suburbs usually are doing something, usually have a better content knowledge than teachers who are often teaching in our townships. There's also a thing with teacher absenteeism. So these are the issues where we have to fix food security, we have to fix education. And if you fix education in this country, it benefits everybody. When we talk about sort of empowering Black people, we've got to get back to those kinds of basics. Because when Black people are truly empowered, it benefits everybody. You have a wider skill market, you have a wider market for your products, you have people with higher incomes who can do more, and it has a multiplier effect for everybody. Those institutions, building good schools like education, like food. And then there's a thing about macroeconomic policy. For us, deregulating the market, making sure there's investment happening in our country and making our country attractive. Because here's the problem. 70% of young Black people are unemployed. So here's my thing. Because of all that data set, because of what's happening in our school system, you probably have about half to 2/3 of people in this country who are functionally illiterate and innumerate. You can't build wealth when you are functionally illiterate and innumerate. If you've seen the statistics of 77% of grade 4 kids who can't read or write for understanding, you can't do anything. There's no job in the world that you're going to get that pays you money. This country can't move up on the income spectrum until we get simple things correct. So when we speak about Black people building institutions, my thing is this. You need to build institutions all round that benefit all South Africans. And if you do that, they will disproportionately benefit the people that start at the bottom, which is Black people. This is the thing we always do in this country. We think we have to have a very race-specific approach. And to go back to AfriForum, AfriForum is doing good work because what? The state is not doing the thing. They're trying to fill in. But if the state had things running properly, like education, like healthcare, like municipalities, like having people register their title deeds, which is one way that Black people can build wealth, because there's a lot of Black people who miss out on wealth because their title deeds are not registered. So my point is simply this. If we build institutions that can be accessed by everybody, that are excellent institutions, and they will, by definition, benefit Black people the most, because Black people, for the majority, are on the underside of society. And education, a good education being built, will benefit Black people and enable Black people to build from that base. But it's going to take time. We shouldn't skip steps.
I'm going to come in here, Sindile, because you've made some lots of points and very nested features. And I do want to give Penuel a chance to respond. Not that all of this is directed to Penuel, or maybe it is, I don't know. But I'll let him defend himself if there's anything to defend. Because I do think there's a nuance in what Penuel said also that's being avoided here. But I'll get to that in a moment, and I'll let Penuel speak to it. But let me just come to Koketso and then Thanda. Sorry, man. Thanda dog, you've been sitting there waiting patiently. Koketso, just jump in here, because I think Sindile did what I was avoiding to do, because I want to play the role of moderator, which is to explain exactly what we mean by institutions. You know, I was using this term black institutions, because I was playing the game that often is played in the corporate media of ascribing opportunity and institutions to race. But inevitably, Sindile makes a point that I actually agree with, which is, why can't we have basic institutions of society, period, working, so that those who are disproportionately affected by a lack of opportunity will also find themselves being proportionately, if you will, benefiting from institutions that cater to all. But your points first before you get to that.
Okay, so yeah, maybe it is somewhat tied to what I wanted to bring up. And again, Nolu and Sindile have actually taken some words out of my mouth. So thank you for that. I don't have to repeat what they've said. Look, at the end of the day, right, we make this analogy that why do we plant trees? You know, you do it so that someone else later on, when you're in the dust in the ground, is going to enjoy the shade. This is the kind of outlook that our Black leaders, political, economical, business, whatever, many of them lack that kind of foresight. They're not planting trees because they want that instant gratification. They want to get rich now. They're not interested in building wealth, which again has been mentioned already, that it takes time. You effectively don't start a business for you to be rich. A lot of the time you do it so that your children and their children's children can be rich. That's why we do it. And it requires planning from the get-go, but our people at large don't have that kind of foresight, or the majority of them don't, not as far as I can see. Now let's go back a bit. Very few Black people, again, I don't want to speak for Black people at large. I'm really not that type of guy, but there's very few Black people that are even remotely aware of the implications of purchasing power. And consumer price index, et cetera, et cetera. You know, it's just one of those acronyms that people ignore, but people don't want to look into it. Like Nolu mentioned, you know, the reality is for many a black child that gets into a tertiary institution, who then, by God's grace, ends up graduating, and they can take things from there. They've had a reality where they didn't give you a car from back home because there was no money for mommy and daddy to give you a car. The money wasn't there. And the reality based on that is that you had to take a taxi, a bus, etc., a train to get to campus. What does that do? It means you have a hard cap in terms of when you have to start heading home, because all of these things are timed. The difference, though, is that someone who had that privilege, they can stay up late in the library and study and leave at 10 p.m. and drive themselves home. They literally have more time to focus on their books. And this is one of the reasons why other races churn out more graduates or churn out an academically higher caliber of graduate as well. And this speaks into the workspace, but people then misinterpret that as the workplace is racist because it doesn't want to hire blacks. And on top of that, they want people with stellar marks, which black people are unable to receive because of systematic this and that. That's a conversation people aren't willing to have. And that's what then affects the purchasing power of even your working professional who happens to be black in relation to some of their colleagues. A lot of us had to buy our first car once we started working. Whereas a lot of my Caucasian counterparts whom I went to school with, whom I went to varsity with, and whom I met up with in the workplace, they didn't have that. They had some form of Toyota Taz that they could drive to their first job or their first job interview with. I didn't have that, and many others didn't. So again, it's that hurdle that exists that affects purchasing power going forward, and people aren't having that conversation. I want to jump onto tenders real quick. Again, I'm not coming out for Penuel specifically here, but I will never advocate for a tender system, especially in the way it is being implemented right now. Why? Because tenders are a drain on the coffers of the state. Why do they drain the coffers? Because government promised people to create jobs, and in their limited options, remember, they are not a market player. They are a stakeholder in the market, but they are not a market player because they've got very little to lose because they spend someone else's money. But they are not a market player. They promise to create jobs, and the way they do it is by enforcing a tender system which bloats the specification of what's required, which bloats the head count of what's required as well. Want to know the reason why many potholes aren't fixed? It's because a tender first has to go out to fix the pothole. And in the end, when things come full circle, you've got 20 guys all surrounding one piece of road, supposedly fixing a pothole, which is not effective, which is not as efficient as hiring 10, 20, 30 full-time staff at a local government level to 9 to 5, go around the area or the town or what have you, to have them go around the town filling potholes as a 9 to 5 job. We don't have that. When a pothole is there, you first need to issue a tender for it to go out, which creates a lag in the system. But more importantly, it increases the headcount. Why? Because the government said we need to create jobs. That's costing you and me money because that's money is coming out of our tax. On BEE, another thing, again, Penuel, I'm not coming out for you here, but there's a line you said where you said people need funding. No, people don't need funding. People need jobs. They don't need funding. People need jobs. We have an unemployment crisis that is not going to be solved by funding. It's going to be solved by jobs. Now, people always say to me that, no, but you know how the banks are racist. If the banks were not racist, they would be giving out more loans and black people would be starting businesses, etc., etc. No, that's a lie. Banks don't give money to someone who has never had a 5-figure amount inside of their account. They are not going to give out capital willy-nilly because you have this grand vision of starting a business and employing others. That is not how it works. And that's now going into the realm of risk factor, etc., etc. Now, who does give the money to those kind of people? Again, it's the state. And where are the government's success stories in terms of the government playing the role of the bank and giving out loans, funding, grants, etc.? You can approach the National Empowerment Fund, the IDC, the NYDA, and there's a few other acronyms you may approach. And you'll find that if you interrogate their numbers, there's single-digit success stories in a lot of the instances. This is why you don't see the government gloating about it at every state of the nation, because the numbers are terrible. If the numbers were great, the president would be singing songs about it and telling everyone, look what a good job government, aka also the ANC, has done. They're not saying that because there's single-digit success figures if you interrogate the numbers yourself. And then lastly, on BMF, I just want to jump on to what Nolu was saying here. I find them to be a pathetic organization, very pathetic. They are mostly famous for award dinners, gala events, and of course, bemoaning the appointment of corporate executives who happen to be of Caucasian descent. That's all they are known for. I've had a Santon gig where I often drove along Rivonia Road past their offices, and I'd ask myself, what do these guys actually do? You know, what do they actually do? The Black Management Forum, I don't know if they've rebranded to Black Business Council or something, but I can't point to any of their success stories. And to wrap it up, I'll make this example, right? The black child, the average black child's first job is going to be most likely working in a white-owned establishment of some sort. I'll leave that to you, and do with that information what you will.
Okay. I'm knocking him Kibelu Penuel Gotela. He's in pig. Welcome to it. This is Liberty and Friends. We're in the last 10 minutes of added extra time. Coming to Thanda Shem, who's been waiting patiently, maybe even for like 30 minutes plus now, to chip in on anything in this conversation. Thanda, I think you can hear the flavor generally in the room as the conversation has morphed and developed itself. Firstly, an almost pushback from everybody so far on the notion of Black institutions, maybe pointing out that it's the fallacy of using race that is the problem in the first instance, when there should be a focus maybe on just quality institutions that serve all, to which Black individuals would disproportionately be the biggest beneficiaries of that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. And even as you chip in there, some of the points maybe you've been sitting on for quite a while.
Yeah. Look, in principle, I do not have a problem with government coming out in 1994. It's politics after all, and coming out and saying we're going to empower Black people. So I don't in principle have a problem with that. What I've analyzed and felt I have a problem with is how they've decided to go about that, where in fact they've not expanded anything. Because if you take the economy that was, if you take the history that the ANC itself would give, it would say that during colonialism and apartheid, the South African economy was built so that it could be sufficiently able to, give the kind of livelihood that mainly the white community would need. So clearly, if you have an economy that is built for that, then you coming in and you say, look, we want to empower this other part of the population, and this part of the population is the majority. Your focus is going to have to be, we're going to have to, make this economy 10 times, what it is currently. So we're going to have to grow it. You're going to have to build a lot of power stations so that we'll be able to do a lot of manufacturing and that sort of thing. And yet that was not what happened. What has happened instead is, as others have mentioned, tender systems and BEE and affirmative action. We're going to take what we already have, and then we're going to try and push the Black people inside it. We're going to try and push it inside it. So we're going to displace a white person, or we're going to displace an Indian person so that we can fit a Black person inside. And all that's doing is it causes obviously racial tensions, but it also means that nothing really gets properly done. The only place where government has the full power to do that is in government. So they've bloated government, and they've hired a lot of Black people, and that's really the main success story that government has about Black people being empowered, is them employing the people themselves. And then but in the private sector, there isn't a huge success story because they haven't really focused on that. Now, I didn't. Sindile was talking about his own community where he grew up in a former homeland, and I was hoping he would complete the story by telling us where it is now, some of those institutions and how that place is, because many of those places after 1994, many of these places that had some success, they've fallen down. So actually, instead of empowering Black people by empowering the places where they lived, so that they can still live in the Transkei, but they can be an even more successful. There was one university or college that was built there that he mentioned. He should have been telling us now that there's another 3 or 4 that have been built in that area. But probably that one that was built has fallen into disrepair. So now those kids are going to go to Wits, and then they're going to fight for places, and then there's going to be all sorts of stories about who's peeing on who's who's peeing on whose books. Whereas they should have been building those institutions. And I spoke in a previous episode, I was here, about all the ghost towns that we have in South Africa, about, you know, the fact that South Africa is actually, instead of the economy growing, the economy is becoming smaller. And everybody is congregating in the metros, and that's where you're seeing a spiraling of these informal settlements and all kinds of things. So that's why I'm saying I don't have in principle a problem with the ANC coming out and saying we're going to empower, or any political party saying we're going to empower Black people and we're going to build Black institutions. Except how they've done it. They've not actually done it. They could have gone back and said, you know what, Black people, where do they own land? Black people own land in the former homelands. That's what apartheid did. So there was actually specific places where Black people had their own land. They should have empowered those places. They should have built up those places. They should have put funding into those places so that the Black people who own land in those places can start becoming wealthier. You understand? And they don't have to come to the towns, and the people who own land in the metros and the towns and the former white areas would not have become so enriched by people, the demand of people wanting to come and live there. You know, it's a whole thing that you can talk about. But the point is that empowerment is not a problem if you're going to do it right by actually trying to grow the economy. And that's not what the ANC has done. They've been too lazy to grow the economy. So instead, they've come up with these bits and pieces type of things that are not actually changing the situation. And that's why we're where we are today.
Penuel, quite a mouthful said here generally, but I think there are a few nested features I want you to respond to. One that I want to pose to you as a question is, you know, we speak a lot, Penuel, about the need to empower Black individuals, and there's a little debate happening in the comment section, which I'm very privy to, and I know why people are framing it the way they're framing it, because ordinarily I don't speak about government empowering anybody. I don't believe that's a role for government. Government, what is government? Government is an inept, incompetent, corrupt institution by itself, because it's all about individuals, politicians, seeking power to acquire it for the sake of power. Therefore, I speak a lot about what our communities doing, what are we as families primarily doing to empower ourselves. I've heard you speak a lot about that. Unfortunately, we don't have Iskhat in a full sense, but capture that thought for me. Respond to my comments, Lana. And can I just quickly say this? We will have you back, Penuel, on the show for a full conversation. And if you'll allow it, regularly on the show. But Penuel, your thoughts?
Ngiyabonga kakhulu Sihle. Ngicela nje ukuthatha lethuba ukubonga again for the invite. Ngicela ukubonga all the panelists that were here this evening. I do apologize for disappearing at some point. I'm happy that my disagreement.
We love disagreement.
My piece got people a bit impassioned, which makes me very happy. Ngicela ukubeka nje ukuthi angizange ukuzodefend ukhongolose or Black politicians. When I started my little rant, the first thing I said is that I have a lot of issues with a lot of Black people at various levels. I believe our government has done more bad than good. I believe a lot of Black business leaders are not doing a good job, even the ones that are celebrated. If you were to go and look where they grew up, and if they've reinvested in their communities, you'll be embarrassed as much as we point at politicians and celebrate these guys. I'm not here to defend amathenda. You know, I think more than anything, we mustn't say amathenda awabo. Nathi kumele singene lapho and serve. You know, most of the tenders in this country, by the way, go to a very small elite group of white and some Indian people. You know, so those never make the stories because we never see the reports of who are the biggest beneficiaries on tenders. Ngeke ngahlala noMzwanele Manyi recently. He was singing the praises of BMF. Unfortunately, I don't know the data, so I wouldn't defend them here. If you guys feel they're not doing a good job, I do agree that not only must they put black people in white businesses, but they should also champion black people to start their own businesses as well. So Nolu is very right in that regard. Ngicela futhi ukubonga uSindile ngalento ayishilo about imfundo, because education is the key. And by education, we're not speaking schooling. We're speaking just the ability to acquire skills so that you can add value to society and add value to your own family. Whether that plays into the mainstream economy, macro economy, the globe, doesn't really matter. But do you have the skills so that you and your family and your community can have dignified lives? And I fully agree with that. I think our schooling system is a shit show. Can go all the way to the top private schools in the country. They're all teaching the same syllabus and curriculum. Just for the fact that their kids end up as doctors, lawyers, etc., doesn't necessarily mean school is good. You know, there's a big problem just with the education. It's not just in South Africa as well, in the world at large. I found it interesting that Koketso went on to say that government must stop tenders, of which I half agree, but they must insource. This is the same government which you look at what they've done with state-owned enterprises. They've also bloated state-owned enterprises. So it's not just with tenders where there's bloated jobs. And then right after that, he goes and he says, we don't need funding, we need jobs. So you want to cut down the jobs, tender and SOE, but then you're saying we need jobs. It's kind of contradictory for me. There's a lot of issues we have with how our economy plays, you know, and the way it's laid out. I have an issue with the fact that since the ANC has taken over, we have become obsessed with employment. Whereas our forefathers were not employees, you know, they were working the land, whether it was the homelands or otherwise. I think we need more people doing that. I'd like to send a shout out to a YouTube channel called African Farming. So anyone who's going to be watching this, please go check out African Farming, just to see some black people that are farming. It's sponsored by some of the more white publications or Landbou, Farmers Weekly. So it's a great partnership with them as well. Opritao and Mocha Love, even though people hate Mocha Love and Yachola 99, Opritao there has been profiling a lot of successful black people there as well. And these are just a few people. There's a whole lot more out there. If you want to create jobs, according to the data out there, SMMEs, small and medium enterprises, are the ones that actually create employment. So it doesn't make sense to say we don't need funding, we need jobs. To create the jobs, you need to capacitate the businesses. And yes, it shouldn't just be an idea, which I think all NYDAs sometimes do. They give out some grants and those things. But you should try and build something with the little bit you have. Use your mother's stokvel, use tithes from Esontweni. If you can save a bit of money from Lauspana corner, then that's fine. I think there's a bit of data that's lacking in some of the comments that I heard here. And I think I implore people to do some research. First and foremost, the BMF and the BBC are two separate entities, the Black Business Council and the Black Management Forum. Please go and do research. If you want to look at some of the success stories of the NEF, the IDC, CIFA, for example, you can go and research that. Don't just go through their annual reports where they highlight their biggest success stories. There are young people like the People's Fund that is funding black, not even black, they're funding people that have contract businesses. There's a whole lot of stories that don't make the news. AfriForum is just one success story by a certain group, and it was helped, it was accelerated by Solidarity, which is actually a trade union. There's a lot of little groups on the side. They're not really good at marketing themselves. The story is not getting out there, but even if you speak to the guys at AfriForum, they can tell you that there are a lot of really cool colored black groups. They're just small, and obviously they're not capacitated. If black people, of which, to be honest, that's why I decided to just give it a juices and focus on people that are my people, my community, people that are willing to roll up their sleeves and get working. But if black people claim they love black people, we can speak about Sindile, speaking about, I don't know if he was speaking about his father, his grandfather, and the homelands. He needs to ask himself, what have I done there? Have I put my hand up to lead and go and revive what was a great space then? Or Matanzima, what they did. Or Lumisa, what they did. What Omangop and them did. It's nice to talk. We bash politicians. Are you willing to get into politics? We bash tenderpreneurs and what they do with their money. Are you willing to go and bid for tenders and then take that money and build institutions? Are you willing to go lecture? Are you willing to go and build institutions in your community? Because it's nice to point fingers and it's nice. What? Obviously, today, the dumbest kids in class, who are very brave, not articulate, probably have warped visions, if any. They're the ones that put their hands up and become a comrade, namakeda, or chief, that get into politics, that make the money, that get to make decisions for this country, because some of us are not willing to do that. So I implore each and every one of us, Jobasi Ilana, to be like, introspect. What am I doing? How am I part of the narrative of changing this thing? And if you are Black, speak about white institutions and those things. Who are you buying your groceries from? Where do you actually live? In which neighborhood? Or are you in a township and are you actually scaling the township? Are you building community gardens? Are you teaching the kids how to shoot guns, how to fix cars, how to build cell phones, etc.? Like, it actually falls on all of us. The blame game has got an expiry date. The ANC has done a shit show of running the country. I don't think the EFF will be better. I don't necessarily think the DA will be better. I have a huge problem with our political system as a whole. I do love what Ngobese was saying, and it's one of the reasons I support AfriForum, so it's a parliament. Some of the work Tutuzane Zuma's doing, Ian Cameron and Action Society, and saying, go back to your community, put your hand up, create WhatsApp groups, go door to door and be like, guys, let's create our own farms or community gardens. Let's put solar. Let's go to church and fundraise. The money in the church can fund our businesses. Are we buying from locally owned businesses? Do we do patrolling here? Do we have guns so that we're capacitated as a community? And I think if we can get that right, the future of this country, and I think as Koketso so beautifully put it, we will be the ones that will plant the seeds of the trees whose shade we'll never get to enjoy. Thank you.
Okay, folks, I'm sorry, but we've not only run over our extra time, we're heading into danger time, Manja. Guys, we must wrap it up here. Again, as always, on the show, we never have enough time to get into some of the big ticket issues that we seek to unpack here. But I mean, very diverse views to a large extent here, even if there was a little bit of convergence around the need for what kind of institutions perhaps, and why one shouldn't be dribbled or distracted by those videos, for example, that I played at the beginning here. Interesting views. Big thank you to all my guests. As I always do at the end of the show, I go around the panel here for folks to tell us how they can get in touch with you, especially if you have your own show or your own column. How do the folks get in touch with you? Thanda, Baba, how do the folks find you if you want to be found on social media?
I'm on Twitter, so at Thanda M2. That's where they can find me. Thank you to for having me here, and have a good evening.
Excellent. I was about to say, your spaces are very interesting on Twitter, so I really encourage people to follow Thanda. I haven't seen them recently, but I know when he does cook up his topics that they're very, very interesting. And indeed, that's the first time where I heard Penuel, funny enough. So thank you, Thanda, for that connection that you've made. Sindile, Baba, how do the folks find you on social media if you want to be found?
I would probably say if you really want to interact substantively, you can find my stuff on the Daily Friend. You can find it at the FMF. Some good reputable newspapers, City Press, Business Live, whatever. It's like sort of there. By the way, I encourage people to look at my latest piece in the Daily Friend. It's a case study on Poland. Just linking that and how South Africa, it's not all downhill. People have this overblown case about us becoming Zimbabwe. I argue, actually, we're closer to Poland than we are Zimbabwe.
Well, that'll definitely make for interesting reading. As Sindile mentioned, he's found as a columnist and writer on the Daily Friend and other publications. That's www.dailyfriend.co.za. Make sure you catch their live show Mondays to Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. Nolu, how do the folks find you on social media?
Sure. Thank you, Sihle, so much for the amazing time we had here. And I just want to say sorry to Penuel if I've hit hard on him, just that it was just conversation. I've enjoyed having him here. Nevertheless, you can find me on Twitter, almost all social media platforms, on my website. I will go back into my podcasting very soon. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you again, Sihle.
Excellent. That is Nolu Maki out in the battle. And she is the pearl of the show. Always nice to have her on the show. Penuel, Puti, how do the folks find you on social media? And what can we look forward to on your show?
I've got 3 YouTube channels that I currently work on. The Penuel Show, Penuel the Black Pen, and the Virtual Nkuku. Sometimes I feature on the Hustlers Corner with DJ Spoo. If you Google Penuel the Black Pen, Penuel, I think all my social media pages should come up there. I'm unfortunately been permanently suspended of Twitter. I'm hoping that our boy from Pretoria is going to do best, bring me back to life. Shout out to Elon Musk. But yeah, man, again, ngicela everyone that was here today. Ngicela everyone that was listening. Aan al die Afrikaner sprekende mense wat geluister het. We love you guys very much, man. Let's come together. Let's stop with this racial division that all the political parties are currently pushing. If we can list our values that we share, we will find each other and we'll build a really, really great country, and we can avoid becoming Zimbabwe or Poland or any other pop country that they want to compare us to. Love you guys very much. Good night.
That is Penuel, the Black Pen. You heard it from him. Koketso, last but not least, how do the folks find you on social media, and what was on the Manpatria show this Saturday, pardon me?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I missed yesterday's Manpatria show. Too much to do, too little time. But yeah, Dumo and Zuzo were there. So yeah, I still haven't listened to it. But yeah, that's where you find me if you're looking for me. First stop, go to manpatria.com. You'll hear some of my views. We typically discuss current affairs, looking back at the week that has gone past. Alternatively, find me out on my Twitter profile, which, yeah, I've gone back to a public profile by popular demand. Yeah, that's basically where you'll find me. And I think we do need a part 2 of today's conversation.
No, fully agreed on that one. And indeed, I must thank my entire panel of guests on here. Guys, super appreciate all of you. I know we will have all of you back on, including Penuel, on the show. Excellent to have a diversity of views on the show. That is what Liberty and Friends is all about. A special thanks, as I said, to all my guests as I get them off screen. And yeah, thank you, dear viewer, for watching the show. As always, you can find us here at the Big Daddy Liberty Show at www, or rather, as I've been told not to say, the www part at bigdaddyliberty.com. Find us there, of course, where you can also support the channel. Help us grow an alternative media space in this country. Goodness me, there's some very interesting conversations I'm having in the background of people who are looking to support this channel. Now, with that being said, you'll find me tomorrow morning, as you always do every weekday from 7 a.m. on my weekday news analysis morning show. That's Ivuga Nazo. You'll find me tomorrow morning, bright and early, on this channel. With that being said, thank you all for watching. I have received a request in the comment section on YouTube by Ular Solis to share a particular video. So look out for that link if you are watching on YouTube. He will share it shortly, and I'm hoping you'll share it now so I can put it on screen. But with that being said, hit the like button on your way out, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next episode of Liberty and Friends. And as I always say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.